Well, greetings, Carl.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm enjoying the spring season. The season is turning. We're May here, June by the time everybody is listening to this. Almost summer, depending on where you are.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, it's such a. I was out on a hike the other morning and thought, I love being in the mountains. I remembered, oh, it's 55 degrees and not snowing. Like I love snow, but it's so this time of year is so great.
I was gonna say, is there a problem being in Utah when it's not snowing?
Well, that's the little secret we don't want anybody to know. People often come. They come to ski and they come
Yep.
for one summer and that's when they move here. Like you
Uh,
come for one summer and that's the hook. So don't, it's terrible. Don't come during the summer.
okay,
Yeah,
understood,
for sure. For sure.
understood.
Yeah. What's happening?
Well, what would you like to delve into today?
There's yeah, funny you should ask.
In
There's
this
this
random Zoom room we found ourselves in together to
that's
do this
right.
recording.
That's right. There's this phenomenon that I've been
Okay.
trying to like get my arms around for a long time, and I ran across a quote a couple of months ago, and I wish I could attribute it. It was on some essay about AI tools, as I recall,
Okay.
and it was just almost like a throwaway line in the essay that is the only thing I can remember from the essay now, which is here's the quote: "The market." Well, let me start by saying this.
Okay.
Uh, my first thinking around this started a long time ago when somebody said to me and it was this was I think Luke Burgess in his book Wanting. We had him on as a guest
Okay.
at the Society of Advice talking about that book, and I think that's where I first heard someone say we're often far more interested, we us humans are often far more interested in being seen as something than actually being the thing. Like you could put in a lot of words here. Like one of my favorites is we're often more interested in being seen as creative than actually being creative. Actually, being creative is really kind of scary and hard work.
Well,
We're
I was
actually,
gonna say, I mean that's just a big, I don't know, being seen as creative is cool and hip, at least in some circles. Actually being creative is just a giant ball of failure risk.
yeah,
That's while
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
judges your creative quality, that seems kind of awful unless you're like really
yeah.
possessed by the muse or something.
That's exactly right. Like, yeah, being seen as we could use contrarian, being seen as contrarian, actually being seen as productive, actually being seen as somebody who deadlifts than actually being somebody who deadlifts. Like there's like you could play around with lots of words in there. So I've started thinking about that. I think that must have been 3 or 4 years ago. And then I read this line that the market for feeling, and we're just going to use what the line said, productive. I think you could swap this out,
Okay.
creative. The market for feeling productive is orders of magnitude larger than the market for being productive. So now we got assume that's true. And I think it'd be fun for us to talk about like, is that true? How have we seen it show up? But now we've got three layers to this game, like feeling, stick with productive for a little bit, feeling productive to our earlier statement, being
Okay.
seen as productive,
Okay.
and then actually being productive. And so I've been thinking a lot about like not definitely for myself. Like as you know, this my work is mainly an adventure journal, not a self-help book. And so I'm almost always viewing these through like how does it apply to me? But then I've been seeing this set of lenses as like shaded everything I'm doing with consulting and coaching clients. And then I'm seeing it from an advisor's eyes towards their clients. So like the question becomes like what are the implications of this idea for ourselves and for our work with clients? And what are some of the like how does it actually apply? Where does it show up? Like implications, applications are very interesting in this idea. So I'll just pause there. That's a lot to throw at you, but what sort of surface as I say that? The market for feeling productive is orders of magnitude larger than the market for being productive.
I mean, my My gut response actually goes back to your other comparable category earlier with creative, like putting creative in the word instead of productive, right? It's easier to it's easier to try to be seen as creative than to actually take all the risks and challenges of being a creative,
Mhm.
laden with, people judging your work and potential for failure and all the stuff that goes with that.
Mhm.
Uh, that if I mean, it feels like very much a mirror when you put in the word productive, right? Feeling productive. I guess now maybe you'll have to parse it further. So I guess like feeling and being seen as productive seems like the new hip thing, or has been, right? It's like it's busyness. The more busy you are, the more productive you are. Like I work 60 hours a week, I work 70 hours a week, I work 82 hours a week because I wake up at 5:15 a.m. and I've done more by 7:15 a.m. than most humans do in their life, right? And like we have all these articles out there of like peak productivity that are usually things that people do hours before I ever wake up. Uh,
Well, just don't lose your thought because like yeah, the books, the second brain,
yeah,
the apps, the tools, the like yeah, there's a whole bunch of the market for tools to feel or be seen as is pretty high. Instagram's a great place to be seen as productive.
yeah. Versus, well, actually, really being productive is hard work. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
systematically, like, pushing yourself into the things that you can do that will actually advance your career or move the needle or do whatever it takes to, like, really, really, quote, do the things that grow and accelerate you forward. They're
Yeah.
hard things. They're really hard
Yeah.
things. I feel like some of that is just the industry's traditional, or right. If the business was easy, everyone would be doing it. I mean, there was a version of this back in the cold calling days, starting out in the insurance world. But the hard workers who are real success are the ones who are willing to do what no one else is willing to do. That's why you should be willing to do another 170 dials today before you leave. But it was built. It was built around that same principle. Um, and to me,
Yeah.
just it crops up all over the place. Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich is all about figuring out in your head like the few things that will move you forward for your like single-minded focus goal towards the big idea that you have that you want to drive for towards. Jim Collins's Big Hairy Audacious Goal is a version of that. Now, like Ben Hardy's Science of Scaling book also has a version of that. They're all like how do you get focused on the few things that really really matter and put all of your energy into those, because that's what really moves the needle on your
Yeah.
career outcomes or your business outcomes or your personal financial goals and objectives, whatever they are. And to me, what almost all of those books come back to is this is a thing that almost no one does because it's actually
Right.
really
Right.
because it's
Right.
really freaking hard, right? Is
Right.
just like
Right.
be busy to seem productive, pretty straightforward. Do the actual really hard things that feel strange and risky to create focus and move the needle. Like that's scary stuff, and most of us don't actually want to do it.
Yeah. When okay, so let's just again just being feeling something, being seen as something, and actually being the thing. And we can stick with productive, but just to be clear to everybody, like you could really, I've played around with all sorts of words in here. Um, my sense is that this is true. That at least my experience has been, and I think this applies to advisors and their clients equally, because those it turns out we're whether we're talking about advisors or clients, we're just talking about a human trait.
Mm,
The market for, the demand for, right? The willingness for people there, the number of people, another way of saying this, the number of people who will pay you to for the opportunity for them, they will pay for the opportunity to feel productive,
mhm,
feel like they're making successful changes with their money, or even being seen as doing that. There's a lot more people that will pay for that than the people. Oh, you know what's interesting about this, Michael, is there's this great Jason Zweig, I think I can't remember who told him this. I mean, it won't take long for we've got the best uh, it's not fact checker, but resource finder in the world on this podcast. She does such a good job. Who does it?
Are you making a reference to me or you mean our team?
You're the team that does the checking on this podcast.
Oh, for our team,
Yeah,
Sydney Squires.
that's right.
Yes,
So good.
hunts down and makes sure all the things get cited and referenced and linked out to properly.
Okay, so
Sydney's
I'm gonna
fantastic.
just in case we want to edit. So what's interesting is Jason Zweig said something super interesting, and I'm sure Sydney will be able to track down the exact attribution. But it's
Find
here's the
link in
quote.
show notes.
Here's the quote. Here's the quote. Um, you can there are three ways to approach this thing of giving advice. You can sell to people, you can write to people you can tell the truth to people who want to be told the truth, and you'll make a living.
Okay.
You can tell the truth. y- Sorry, here we go. You can tell the truth to people who want to be told the truth, and you'll make a living. You can lie to people who want to be lied to, and you'll make a fortune. You can tell the truth to people who want to be lied to, and you'll go broke. And I think there's like some interplay between these whole examples of like, okay, if you try, if people just want, if part of what somebody wants is just to feel a little bit more productive, like feel a little bit more organized around their money, feel a little bit better about the decisions they're making. Like sometimes I used to get really frustrated with that. I was like, what are you, in fact, I had a friend who actually asked me that. He's like, what are you, a circus clown? Just up there juggling for people? Like, this is just theater. You just want to make people feel something. And I, I sometimes would get really frustrated, like, no, I only want people who actually do the thing. But it turns out these things are really hard to get. Like, where does the line between feeling something, being seen as something, and being something change? And is it our jobs as advisors necessarily to always make sure that people are doing the thing, or does them feeling a little bit productive, maybe even being seen as productive with their friends, lead to a greater likelihood that they'll actually do the thing? You know, like those are the kind of questions that bounce around in my head about this. This is the kind of thing
What?
I spend 2 hours a day up in the mountains thinking about.
I didn't even thought about this from the client context. I mean, so then the implication is, I know, are you trying to give advice as though all of your clients want to be more financially successful when in truth some of them just want to feel more financially successful or be seen as trying to be more financially successful but aren't actually ready to
That's
do the
exact.
changes it takes? I mean, here again, like another version of it's easier to feel like you're doing something or be seen than to actually like do the thing. Be the
Yeah,
being state is the hard one here.
that's exactly right. Like, and yeah, don't let's get back to that client thing because that's really, really interesting question. Is that what we're doing here? Because remember, feeling and being seen as the interesting thing about feeling and being seen as number one and number two versus actually being the thing is you get almost all the benefit. As you pointed out, like feeling creative, being seen as creative, that's actually kind of fun. You know, like it's cool. You can get almost big asterisk by almost all the benefit by doing number one and number two without any of the risk. Right? Because the moment you go be creative in the world, you got a giant pile of very intimate risk. And so that's why I think the market for these things, why I think this is actually true, is
Hmm.
we can we can feel like I'm really good at time management by just reading David Allen's Getting Things Done book. I can feel that way.
Hmm.
I could maybe even buy a little booklet or something, a bullet journal, and I could let my family see it, and I'd even be seen that way. But actually doing it, David Allen's process every day, are you kidding me? That's turns out if I try that, there's a chance I'll fail one day. Actually, there's a high likelihood there that you will for sure, miss a day here and there, and you're gonna have to deal with that. So it's super interesting why this statement is probably true, and then how does it apply? How do we protect ourselves from feeling or being seen as a place to hide? versus doing the work? And then how do we work with this with clients?
I guess I don't know, I come to it a little bit from the maybe the opposite end.
Shocker.
Uh well, so look, my head first went to a version of what you just said, right? The if you're I don't know if you're productivity obsessed, then the people who feel productive and try to be seen as productive but aren't actually being productive are hiding, right? We have all sorts of labels for it now. You know, you're playing office. You're as Matthew Jarvis puts it. You're allowing yourself to be distracted. You're doing the work that doesn't really move the needle, have the impact, like as though it's sort of as though it's wrong, right? I mean the I think the word used like it's hiding behavior, right? So the implication like you're not doing the thing you're supposed to, so we're gonna like slightly slap you on the wrist for that hiding behavior, and then try to encourage you back the other direction. And I guess part of what strikes me, I just uh, when the norm is not doing the thing, and the weird, strange exception are the few people that do the thing,
Yeah.
maybe not doing the thing actually really is normal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and the
Hmm.
hard thing is hard, right? You know, I mean, what if you're not hiding because you haven't taken the giant productivity leap where you change all your systems and blow everything up? What if you're a normal human being
That's right.
and a few like weird freaks manage to do whatever the other thing is where you do all the things
That's right.
in David Allen's book every day, 365 days a year successfully?
Yeah.
Yay, kudos to you. Apparently you're wired differently than I am.
I think that's exactly right. Right. I think that's the reason that quote is actually holds up to scrutiny. The market for it is orders of magnitude larger because it's actually normal. Like it's probably a bit normal for us to hide. It's probably a bit normal for us to just want to feel a certain way, maybe even be seen as a certain way. You know, it, it shields us. I was thinking about this. I've just got some notes here that sometimes I call this productivity theater. You know, productivity theater is the avoidance of creative vulnerability, but it often shows up disguised as discipline. You know, and so I think with clients, so here's an interesting story. I this has been a very, very long-term thread I've been thinking about. My friend Jeremy was the one that said to me, because I was telling him about speaking engagements. I was like, yeah, I go do these speaking engagements. I said, I really enjoy them. The feedback I get is that they're impactful. And he said, do you think anybody actually changes because of that? And I was like, I don't know, but probably very few because it's just that's like, you know, I know for me, I've attended a lots of really impactful keynotes or workshops, and I've implemented very little of what, but it's still had an impact in my life. And I was telling this, and he's like, he got kind of straight up with me. He was the one that said, what are you, a circus clown? Just up there juggling on stage, like entertaining people? So that's Jeremy on one spectrum. Then I had this experience.
Well, if most of us want to feel and be seen as going to a Carl Richards session counts, and that feels good. So thank you, Carl.
Yeah, and well, I think that's very nice of you, and I hope that's true. But I was feeling a lot of angst because of the way Jeremy came after me for it. And then when I, as part of the 50 Fires project, I went to Magnolia to meet with Chip and Joanna Gaines. And if you've been to Magnolia to Waco to the like the silos, like it's this whole thing. I had no idea that this place existed. I didn't even know what really was
What
going
is
on.
it for just for people who aren't familiar and
Yeah, it's
don't
like
follow that
where
part?
it's they basically took over a huge piece of the town of Waco
Mhm.
and built this giant compound where they've got like their production office, their office, they've got you know, a big place to have concerts. It's like a little park. They've
Okay.
got they're built in the great old grain silos, right? They've got these, it's called the silos.
Okay.
A really beautiful coffee shop. Chip's got a store where they sell like the Yeti coolers and the, you know, and then there's also this store where they sell, and this is my point. I went there and there's people everywhere. Like I was just like, what?
Okay.
I felt like I had walked in, you know what I mean? My wife knew about it. And I had friends that knew about it. I just had never. So I go there. I'm like, what's going on? Like I go in the coffee shop and it's, and then I went over to the big store. So they have like a big store and it's got all of the,
Okay.
maybe like the and a lot of kitchen stuff. And I saw, the cookbooks and kitchen setup and
Mhm.
how to set a table and how to entertain. And I saw people buying like dishes. And so, I literally sat there for a few minutes over in the corner and just watched people buying things.
Hmm.
And I thought, these people, there's going to be, I bet almost everyone who goes here who buys something is going to go home and like it could be one of Joanna's favorite candles. They're
Okay.
going to put this candle someplace that they're going to occasionally light that. There are people here who are going to set a table and have a dinner in a slightly different way for their family because they had this experience.
Hmm.
Big or small, they're going to do something slightly different because they've had this experience. Are Chip and Joanna circus clowns? Like they're on TV. It's the definition of entertainment.
Hmm.
So that was like the other anchor of this thought was like Jeremy saying, "What are you, a circus clown?" And then the experience at Magnolia thinking, "Wait, if somebody just goes home and welcomes their family to dinner slightly different because of the experience, that's massive change." Like and maybe it's small change at sometimes I think about this as like an inch deep but a million miles wide.
Hmm.
Or sometimes our work is an inch wide and a million miles deep. And I think it's interesting to think about that like maybe getting somebody to feel something, maybe that's actually the highest calling an advisor could have. And then if they feel that thing frequently, maybe they'll go home and make a subtle little change. And maybe that'll lead to more subtle little changes. And we all know everything that we do are just subtle little changes compounded over time. So I've learned to kind of like not say either or, but realize that they're yes ands. Is that tell me what you think about that?
I mean, I can see the pairing. Look, from the well, so it's an interesting juxtaposition, right? Uh, In a world like the games who are entertaining one to many, right? There's some phenomenon of, I don't know, if I entertain 1,000 and one of them makes a meaningful change, then I had an impact. Like I did something, I accomplished something. I mean, look, you can't change all the people's minds all the time.
Yeah.
If we put something out in the world and a few people got meaningfully impacted, it's really hard to get people to change. So that's a really powerful, meaningful thing. What a wonderful success. And then there's this crazy thing we do called financial planning where we sit down with every single client, one darn client at a time, and we don't get judged in the realm of, well, I did financial planning sessions for my 100 of my clients, like 3 of them implemented my recommendations. Isn't that great? Like the bar is really high. We're supposed to get every client to implement our recommendations. Every single one is supposed to not just like feel or be seen as, but actually be the change that we're recommending. So
Hmm.
I don't know,
Hmm.
it strikes me the bar feel by like this model and framework, the bar feels very high in the work that we're supposed to do with clients when most of us are still good old fashioned humans and the stuff's actually ridiculously hard for us to make change and do these things ourselves.
Yeah, and look, yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I want to be clear, like this, to me, the interesting thing about these kind of discussions is not that there's an answer. It's just like an interesting framework and it's an interesting question. But I like the idea though of I mean, if you like, does this change the way you see advice adherence problems? Like if you start to finally like, oh, maybe that's why, like you'll see in an ideal client profile, like I want ideal clients who take my advice and implement it, like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I know a lot of advisors that have literally written that in. Like part of ideal
Sure,
client definition is, takes my advice and implements it.
of course,
Because
because
it's
it
frustrating to see them not.
the other and yeah, and the number of conversations I've had with advice, this has actually really been helpful for me. I feel like if anybody wants to send me a bill for the therapy, please send it. Because it's interesting because when they don't implement it, you wonder what they're paying for.
Hmm.
You wonder if you're providing any value. And I wonder if there's an edge there where you can be like, yeah, I'm actually am providing a little value. They feel a little bit better about themselves. They're making some progress. Maybe the measurement of the progress is a little bit lower. Because if it's true that it turns out what we're asking people to do is hard.
Yeah.
Like it's easier to read another book about how to make investment decisions. It's easier to watch another hour of the Financial Pornography Network on TV than it is to actually decide that you're going to spend a little bit less, or you're going to prioritize a goal, or you're going to, have a hard conversation with a family member because it's part of your financial plan. We're asking people to do hard things.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. Does that mean we should take on a bunch of people who don't actually ever do anything? No, that would be a really frustrating business. But I think it's helpful to understand like the reason that's on your ideal client profile is probably because this is hard for humans. Most humans are more interested in just feeling it.
I think it's an interesting question to raise. Like, why I said why do my clients keep why do I have that subset of clients who keep paying me the fee and then basically don't implement any of the things that I recommend? That to me there is some interesting essence here of because maybe their goal wasn't the being level, it was the being seen as or feeling level further downstream, and maybe that's all they wanted right now, and maybe I'm scratching that itch successfully for them.
Yeah.
Right? I mean as I reflect back on versions of this, there are certainly a few clients I can think of over the years where I don't know, being seen as trying to get our finances in order with my spouse was more important than actually getting my finances in order. Right? They weren't there to fix their stuff. They were there to show their spouse they were trying.
Yeah, and what
Like a
my
version
friend
of being
Jer
seen as.
yeah, the Jeremy spectrum of this would be like, what are you, a joke? Like, come on. And the just the Magnolia spectrum of this, like if we're gonna label them those, would be like, hey, maybe that's enough. Like maybe that's a really like for right now, for this particular moment, for this particular person, maybe the best thing you can do is just be like, bro, you're doing great.
Yeah.
Like you're doing great. Keep it up. Like and you know what I mean? Like and the other thing to keep in mind is it's not like all clients in every single area of their financial lives are one or the other, right? There could be goals they're like, and there could be other things. Gosh, I've just been postponing that. I don't really want to do that right now. So that's super interesting to me.
Which I guess gets back to some things that like Dr. Megan Lertz and others have put out there that comes over from the psychology and therapy realm, right? There's often a question to the effect of uh is this something you actually want to take action on, that you're ready to take action on?
I love
And
that.
and sometimes clients say no. Like, I appreciate the advice. I'm taking it all in. I'm not actually ready to do anything with it. But I'm taking it in and maybe you're moving the needle for me a little bit. But the mere fact that you said, here's what I recommend, does not mean today's the day I was actually ready to act on that advice.
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you hear her using sometimes the like on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to like
Yeah.
is that another place where this shows up?
Yeah, yeah. Scaling questions like that, I think also work here.
Yeah,
All just with the recognition that, you know, being the creative, being productive, being the actual financially confident and successful person that maybe I have not been as a client up to this point in my life, like these are things that are so hard that a lot of us take action never or infrequently, and takes a lot of build up to get to the point where we're ready to take the action that makes a big change in our lives, because change is really hard. And so maybe it's okay and normal that not all clients are there yet. And the fact that they reached out and asked us for advice and engaged us is not actually a concrete indicator that they're ready yet.
Yeah. I all I really want to say is amen. It just makes me this is super. It's super interesting to me because it could just be yeah, that feels to me like part of the craft of advice is like recognizing the difference between like, oh, are we here to, what can I do to be most helpful here, right? You just want to be heard on this frustration.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually want to change this frustration. You said you were like a five. What would have to happen in order for you to be a seven in terms of taking action? Or why wasn't it a three? Like, I just think this job is so awesome. And I think understanding this job being the financial advisor's job, because it just gives all we're talking about here is like, who else gets to get into that level of almost like spiritual practice with someone
Yeah.
in terms of getting you closer to the person you say you want to be,
Yeah.
right? And just I think what you've really demonstrated for me today is that like there's a level of empathy there with just like, hey, this is hard. Turns out it's, you know what? The reason you feel that way is because that's normal. That's how a normal
Uh-huh.
human feels, right? Welcome to the
Yes.
club. What do you want to do about
Oh,
it? What do you want to do about it? Like super interesting. Thanks, Michael.
awesome. Thank you, Carl.
Cheers.